This is Orthotomeo, hitting the mark with the biblical text. And I am Dr. S.W. Kibler, your guide into the biblical text where truth lives. Just want to thank you so much for being part of this series as we shoot straight and talk straight to hit the bullseye of the biblical text, knowing God and His Word. If you're interested, I do have another YouTube channel. It's called The Cosmic Bible, God's Word for Today and Beyond. And that's where we look at what's often considered as fringe teachings of the biblical text. We look at such things as the sons of God, Nephilim, giants, right? The demonic spirits in this world, the evil spirits, unclean spirits. We look at things such as skinwalkers and Bigfoot, and how the biblical text may insinuate those, at least the basis of the legends. So it's really an interesting time. So if you have the opportunity, go ahead and look up the Cosmic Bible, God's Word for Today and Beyond, because it really does apply for where we are today, and it does give us some answers of what's going on in our world today. So we're going to look forward now with today's broadcast of Orthotomeo. And as I mentioned last week, we looked at day 3. We looked in Genesis chapter 1. We looked at dry land appearing and the first plants on earth. And I mentioned this article that I had found in Scientific American. It's titled How the First Plants Came to Be. How the First Plants Came to Be. And it's a genetic analysis, and it reveals what they assume is the ancient, complex, and symbiotic roots of photosynthesis in plants. And this is an article by David Bigelow, and it was done on February 16th, 2012. So I'm going to read this article in part. So, quote, according to the analysis of C. paradoxus genome, roughly 70 million base pairs, this capture must have occurred only once because most modern plants share genes that make the merger of photosynthesizer and a larger host cell possible. So it's talking about how photosynthesis came to be and how plants are able to utilize it and use that as energy, right? That union required cooperation not just from the original host and the formerly free-ranging photosynthesizer, but also apparently there had to be some bacterial parasite, such as the chlamydia-like cells, such as Legionella, which includes the species that causes Legionnaire's disease. Those must have provided the genes. They provided the genes that enable the ferrying of the food from domesticated cyanobacteria, plastids, and chloroplasts to the host cell, unquote. So that's a lot of words. But what they're saying is that these organisms had to begin in the water, and they had to come together in a very specific way, and it was so specific that it could only have happened once. It's not a continuing process, that it could only have happened once, because all the green leafy plants and so forth share these same things. So it's not a secret that life is complicated. Even plant life is complicated. I'm not criticizing the hypothesis. I agree with it that it happened only once. And those may be the integral parts of it. I believe that it did happen only once. I just happen to believe that it happened once when the Creator God called it to being, made it happen. But the argument isn't over whether it occurred or what the components of the plant life is. The difference in the theories is about when. How long, right? How long of a time frame, and was it purposeful or coincidental or accidental? And this is where we come into the biblical text, that the when we have is on day 3. The how long, it was within a 24-hour period of time. And was it purposeful or coincidental? It was on purpose. God caused it to happen. That's where the rub comes, right? The rub comes by looking at the biblical text and knowing that it is true. Science finds these realities, as we just read in the Scientific American Journal article, of how these things work together and how complicated it is, and that it could only have happened once. And we can agree with that. But they're leaving God out of it. Now, when we look at the creation, living creatures in the water, they do not come into being until day 5. Plant life originated on day 3. See? So, where science is saying that these water creatures, entities came together and made photosynthesis possible in a larger host cell that was able to then glom together and make a plant, and was able to ferry this energy from the sun. Right? The water, or the life in the water, had to be there already. The problem is that plant life originated 2 days before water life. So, is it possible that those things necessary for plant life were created before they were placed in the water? Yes, it is very possible that those things necessary for plant life were created before they were put into the water. So it's not impossible for us to see that that's a reality with God and His Word. Right? So there was water, dry land appeared, there were plants, and then there was life put into the water. See, there is a thoughtful, intelligent design to creation. It doesn't mean that it had to come out of the water before it could be a plant. It could have, and it looks like the creation of the plants, it did happen before life in the water. So it's very interesting. This is how it appears in the biblical text. So it could have happened exactly. Those components may be really correct, as in that article. But what we have to realize is that God's Word says plant life came first. So hopefully science will catch on and pay attention to God's Word. So life is complicated, even though things that we usually don't think about and we take for granted. And I just was thinking about even the digestion of food, all of our different organs. You look at the complication, the complicated little piece of the article that I read about plant life. Just think about just digestion. I mean, all the different organs in our body, they have to work together and excrete different fluids and different enzymes and different components just so we can digest the food. And they all have to work in symphony with each other, and that includes even bacteria. The article, it said that there had to be this bacteria. Remember that Legionella, chlamydia type of bacteria, organism? It has to be present. Well, we have to have bacteria in our gut to digest our food. If we don't have the right bacteria in our gut, in our intestines, we don't digest the food. Matter of fact, some of the waste from the bacteria in our digestive system is where the nutrients come from. The bacteria make the nutrients, including vitamin K. So life is really, really complicated. And the reason I share this is even the smallest, most often negative life forms, like bacteria, right? I mean, we have become such a sterile society that we try to kill everything. We kill every virus and every bacteria. But these bacteria are crucial. They serve a function. And some of these are crucial for our digestion. And the waste products of these bacteria are essential for our survival. So I just wanted to share that. So let's get back to the biblical text for today, and that's day 4 of creation. And we're going to be looking in Genesis chapter 1, verses 14 through 19, and I will be reading from the English Standard Version. And God said, let there be luminous bodies in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons, for days and for years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heavens, and to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And God made the two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the lesser light to rule the night, and the stars. It's really kind of interesting that the stars are just kind of mentioned. The rest of the planet, everything else out there, it was just put out there. But he really draws attention here in the text to the greater light and the lesser night. God set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth, to rule over the day and over the night, and also to separate the light from the darkness. And God saw that it was good, and there was evening and there was morning, the fourth day. All right. So, although there was light, which was created on day 1, and the expanse was created on day 2, now what's going to be day 4, the planets and the stars, the moon, are placed in the expanse that was already created, and luminescence is given to them. That is, the light source is redesignated from the original source. We're not told what the original source was, but we can guess, we can speculate that it was God emanating the light himself. He was the light source. But in our world, there needs to be a light source. There has to be a source for the light. Photons need something to emit them, right? Photons need to be emitted from something. So we're going to look at light today, and we're going to look at this electromagnetic spectrum of radiation, right? The human eye can detect some of it. This electromagnetic radiation occurs over a wide range of wavelengths, right? And that's what it is. Wavelengths, from gamma rays that are the smallest to radio waves, which are the largest. It's always a series of waves, but we experience these in different ways. So within this broad spectrum of waves, this electromagnetic spectrum, there are wavelengths that are visible to the human eye, right? And it's a very small band of these wavelengths that we perceive as sight, right? And they go from the red to violet. Look at the rainbow. You can see the colors that we can perceive. They're in the rainbow. Are there other colors? Yes. We just cannot see them. They're there. We just cannot see them. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. So we have on one end of the, just outside of our visible wave, electromagnetic spectrum of a wavelength that we can see, we have infrared. On the other end, we have the ultraviolet, right? So all light isn't sensed the same way, and not all life forms experience light waves in the same way. Infrared radiation, that piece is just below what we can see, and they're a little bit longer wavelengths. They're below red into that visible light wave range. It's invisible to the eye, but we can still detect it. How do we detect infrared? Sensation on the skin, warmth, right? On the other side of the visible light is the ultraviolet. It's above violet. It's tighter wavelengths, right? And it goes from just on the outside of the violet, right, and it goes to the X-ray, right? So right in between the violet and X-ray is this ultraviolet light range wavelength. And it's undetectable by the human eye, although when the ultraviolet light falls on certain materials, that may cause those materials to fluoresce, right? And that's why we have fluorescent paint. You shine a black light on it, ultraviolet light, and it lights up, it fluoresces. It emanates this this electromagnetic radiation off of the paint. Or animals, like scorpions. They luminesce when you shine a ultraviolet light on them. So even insects see different than we do. Animals see different than a human does, and many insects see differently. And they like the honeybee. The honeybee sees flowers in a different way than we do, because honeybees, they can see in the ultraviolet wave range. We can't, they can. So when we look at a beautiful bouquet of flowers, right? We say, oh, that's beautiful. They're yellow and red and pink. Well, when the bee sees them, they see it in a different color. They don't see the color that we see because they see ultraviolet as well. And that's what attracts the bees, the honeybees, to the blossoms, is actually the ultraviolet light. Light's complicated. It's a complicated reality because light waves can also carry information. How about that? So, have you heard of fiber optics? Right? Some of you may have fiber optics that's bringing information into your home. Right? Just light going through, right, these little fibers, fiber optics. Okay. Light carries information. That's how they discovered it. It's always carried information. They just determined how to put information into it that they can send and then retrieve it. So light carries information. So it begs the question, what came first, the light or the information? What came first, the light or the information? Well, the biblical text tells us light was created before the objects that emit the light waves, right? Before they were created, light was created. So there had to be a source for the light. So the information had to come from that source. So that source of information had to precede the light. So information came first, and it came from God. Light is a standalone creation apart and separate from the luminescent bodies, the sun and the stars and so forth. It's all waves. There are waves we can see. This electromagnetic spectrum. There are waves we can see. There are certain wavelengths. They look different colors to our eyes. There are waves we can hear. You're listening to me now. And there are waves we can feel and heat. And there are waves that can see through us, like X-rays. And there are waves that can kill us. So this electromagnetic spectrum must have been created on day one. It wasn't just the visible light that was created on day one. It was the electromagnetic spectrum. And therefore, it was created before there was anything able to see it, hear it, or feel it in these dimensions in which we live on Earth. It was there, and then those things that needed it are created. Absolutely, absolutely awesome. So now, the Creator gives us the ability, gives these heavenly bodies, right? The sun, the moon. The moon reflects the light from the sun emanates the light, and the stars give off light, and other objects reflect the light. So He gave these certain bodies, these certain planets or stars, the ability to emit light. Right? He created light, and then He gave them the ability to emit the light that He created. It's a transference of ability and responsibility. The Creator sets the responsibility of these lights, right? He gives them a responsibility. They are to emit this light, and then because they have that responsibility and that ability, then He gives man the responsibility to notice what He has done, right? Because He says, let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years, and let them be lights in the expanse of the heaven to give light upon the earth. So they have a responsibility and an ability to luminesce, or to be a luminary, that they give off light. But then man is given a responsibility to pay attention to what God has made of these light-emitting heavenly bodies. So man has a responsibility also. We look at this. It says it will be for signs and for seasons, and there's a misunderstanding about the seasons. We all know that the seasons are not a result of the light itself, but a result of the orbit of the Earth around the sun, and then the proximity of the Earth to the sun as it orbits. Right? And we get summer, fall, spring, and winter. Right? We get those 4 seasons. That's what we call them. But that's not what the biblical text is talking about. It's not talking about the 4 annual seasons. It's talking about something completely different. That's the Hebrew word moed. Moed, it's a different word. It's just an unfortunate translation into the English. Instead of seasons, it should mean an appointed time. And it can mean an appointed place, an appointed time, a meeting place, right? So it's very specific, and often it refers to a feast, a meeting time and place for a feast, right? And if we read in the scripture, we read there are 7 feasts that the children of Israel were to observe. And there were some that fell in what we call the spring, and some that occur in what we call the fall. And they're very popular. You've heard of them before. You've heard of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, of Passover, right? And of First Fruits. Those all are spring. And then there's 50 days later, after Passover, there is the Feast of Pentecost, right? And then that's a spring feast. And then in the fall, there is Trumpets, Day of Atonement, and Tabernacles. Right? So those are appointed times. Those are moeds, and that is what the scripture is speaking of, an appointed time to meet, appointed feasts. So when they were to meet, it wasn't based upon the sun, it was actually based upon a moon, because the Hebrews went by a lunar calendar, not a solar calendar. It's different than ours, right? But that's exactly what Genesis 1 here is describing. Now, there were certain months, right, and they occurred. They were all about 30 and a half days long, right? And they were consistent, right? But it was determined by the lunar calendar, but they fell on certain days. That's a moed. That's a moed, and that was that time. It wasn't the season. It wasn't the spring or the fall. It was that meeting time that they were to present themselves to God. That's really what it's referring to, not the annual seasons. There's a lunar calendar, right, that we look at, and this is what the Hebrews were operating on. It's important for us to understand that the ancients weren't ignorant and the Bible wasn't wrong. There's not an error in the Bible about the seasons. The error is thinking that it's referring to something that it's not. That's where the error is. All right. So we're gonna jump ahead just a bit. It means appointed time, right? That's what it means, appointed time. So we're gonna look at this. We're gonna jump to chapter 4 just to look at this appointed time, and just for clarification. And this is about the story of Cain and Abel. So are you familiar with that? It's chapter 4. It says, now Adam and Eve, his wife, he knew her, and she conceived, bore Cain, saying, I have gotten a man from the help of the Lord. And again, she bore another, his brother, Abel. Now Abel was a keeper of sheep, and Cain was a worker of the ground. In the course of time, Cain brought to the Lord an offering of the fruit of the ground, and Abel brought of his flock. And the Lord looked with favor upon Abel and his offering, but upon Cain and his offering, the Lord did not look with favor. So, in this portion of the biblical text, in the course of time, that's the moed. That's the season, right? It was the appointed time. That's what the phrase course of time, it means an appointed time. That's the reference, an appointed time. So there in Genesis 4, with Cain and Abel and everyone who was alive at that point on earth, there was an appointed time, an appointed place for an appointed reason, and they were to bring an appointed offering to the Lord, right? That is what the scripture is referring to as we read in Genesis 1 about the sun and the moon, these luminaries. They are to be for seasons. It's for these appointed times. They were to count the days in the months to the specific appointed time that they were to come and bring to the Lord what was required of them. Okay, so I want to talk just a little bit about days now, and that's the Hebrew word yom, and yom is used throughout the Hebrew text. And it can mean a day or longer. It can mean a day or an extended period of time, right? That's just the way the word works. And we just read that there was appointed times, appointed days, appointed yoms. They were to appear before the Lord, and it was dictated by the planets, like the sun, the moon, and so forth. And I think it's important that we look at this yom, because now we're counting the days of creation, right? Day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5, day 6, right? And that's where a lot of debate comes in as to how long was the yom, because yom is not definite in itself, right? It can, like I said, yom can mean a day or longer. It can mean 1,000,000 years. It can be the day of the Lord, and that's happening. That took a long time. So as we look at this time and yom, right? You have to look at what else is in the biblical text. You have to look. So you can say, oh, that tree is short. Well, that tree is short compared to what? What is that tree compared to be short? Is the tree short compared to an ant, or is the tree short compared to the Eiffel Tower? Right? So there has to be a context. There has to be some kind of parameters that you can use these kinds of words that have a variety of meaning. It's comparative, right? So in the biblical text, we read that there are parameters that are set upon the yom, and it is very specific, and it tells us exactly what that yom means, right? Does it mean a day, or does it mean an extended period of time? Well, in the biblical text, it's very clear that the earth was rotating on its axis, and there was a light source, right? And there was evening and morning, there was the first day, or day 1. So now we have parameters. There's an evening and a morning, and there's a day. So that gives us the parameters and the comparison as to what yom is speaking about. It's a yom of an evening and a morning. So we go back to that 24-hour period of time. And we know that it's consistent. There's a consistency to the parameters, because there's day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, and day 5, and day 6. Right? So the parameters specify the specific amount of that time of yom. Right? If the biblical text just said yom 1, day 1, and there wasn't evening and the morning, you could logically then say, well, that could be 1,000,000 years. And you would be correct. It could be, if there was no parameters set upon it. But because God was specific in his giving of his word, and we have that there's these parameters of evening and morning, we know that yom is not 1,000,000 years. It's not an extended period of time, unless the earth was rotating very, very slowly. But we know it wasn't. All right. So we have this course of a day. It's a 24-hour period of time, and then they're numbered. It's consistent, and that's the way it was set up, and that's the way that it continues. And that's kind of what this little graphic you can see in the back here. So it's kind of interesting to think. So what's a day? It's only a day to us. It's only a day to us. It's not a day anywhere else. Only a day here on earth. That day, that yom, is only good on earth. It's not good anywhere else. How long is a day on other planets? Well, you might have a little difficult time seeing this, so I'm going to read it for you. So we know our day is 24 hours, right? On Mercury, a day is 1,408 hours. On Venus, a day is 5,832 hours. On Mars, it's just an Earth hour longer, 25 hours. On Jupiter, it's only half of one of our days, 10 hours. Saturn, 11 hours, Earth hours, right? On Uranus, 17 hours, and on Neptune, 16 hours. So you can see a day of 24 hours really only, in our understanding in this solar system, only applies to Earth. It doesn't apply anywhere else. Nowhere else. So we measure time by days, right? And then we break that down into hours and minutes, and we move it up into bigger chunks into weeks, months, and years. So how long is a year on other planets? You might be able to see this graphic a little bit better. Well, what takes 365 days on Earth, it is only 88, the equivalent of 88 Earth days for a year on Mercury, and 225 Earth days for a year on Venus, 687, almost twice, on Mars. Jupiter, 4,333 Earth days in their year. Saturn, 10,759 Earth days for their year. Look at this. Uranus, 30,687 Earth days for their year. And Neptune, 60,190 Earth days for a year on Neptune. Isn't that incredible? So we see time as relative. It's relative to where we are. And this is on Earth. And that's how God deals with us. I know we kind of talked about this when we looked at the concept of time, but it just seems appropriate to just substantiate it now here, that time is relative to this earth. And that's how we experience it. And that's how God communicates to us, is in the confines of this earth and these dimensions in which we live. Once we get outside this earth, time is different. And we need to realize that God is not contained by time. Right? The Creator God is outside of time and space as we know it. Well, day 4 was for Earth and those living beings that would be on Earth. Our experience on this planet is why the Creator God placed the planets and the stars, the sun, the moon, and everything out there. And He placed them for us, and for us to pay attention to them, because they are for signs. That means signals. It's going to show us something, right? And it wasn't only to designate feast, but just another example is the wise men, the Magi from Babylon, from the east. They were following a star that they had been looking for that signified the birth of the King of the Jews. They saw the sign in the stars, right? So that's just an example. But we're supposed to pay attention because there are other prophecies about the signs in the heavens involving the planets, the sun, and the moon, including the earth. And it wasn't just only for that, but we need to pay attention to it. It was for season and for years, but it was for days and nights, right? Days and nights. And that's where we want to finish up today, is just days and nights. And that is, so often we get involved with how long we're going to live, how many years we're going to live, and what we're going to do with all those years. And that's kind of the way that we plan, is for years. And when we do that, we often ignore and neglect the day, just the single day. And really, Scripture says we only have today. Worry about today. Tomorrow will take care of itself. So I want to encourage you to live today, to live in the best way that you can. Pay attention to today, what you're doing, and who God has given you to share this day with. Right? Take full advantage of sharing today, each day, with the ones that God has given to you that love you and that you love them. Don't become so fixed on the longevity of life. Let's think about the brevity of life, to make sure that the small pieces of life, we really make them count, and that we live for the Lord. Psalms 90 verse 4 says, "For 1,000 years in your sight," speaking of the Lord, "for 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past." Or as a watch in the night, just working a night shift. You know, time is relative to us. With God, it's completely different. But with us, He's given us the day. And in Proverbs 16:9 it says, "The heart of man plans his way, but the Lord establishes his steps." We plan and we live for the future. It's when we miss out on today. When today is gone, it cannot be relived. Don't miss out on today. The Lord said, this is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. So let's do that. Let's notice today. Notice today with those that you love and rejoice because the Lord has given it to you. This has been Orthotomeo, and as you can see here, I kind of changed up the background here. This is Orthotomeo, hitting the mark with the biblical text, and that's what we want to do. We want to shoot straight, don't we? Good, here we go. Remember, know the truth, stand on the truth, and speak the truth. God bless you. Thank you for joining me today.